Have you ever felt like something inside you keeps repeating the same old pattern, no matter how much you try to change? Like a quiet echo from the past that never fully fades. Maybe you've asked yourself, why do I still feel this way after all these years? Even with time, wisdom, and experience under your belt, there are emotions that seem to linger. Uncertainty, guilt, self-doubt. Not all the time, no, but in certain moments, they creep back in. And here's a gentle question I invite you to sit with for a moment. What if those emotions aren't just about now? What if they were planted much earlier, before you even had words to describe them? What if, deep within your subconscious, they're tied to your very first bond, the one you shared with your mother? Now, this isn't about blame. That's not where we're going. This is about clarity. It's about understanding the emotional foundation on which so much of your life has been built. The relationship with your mother forms an archetype, a deep and powerful blueprint that quietly shapes how you love, how you trust, and how you see yourself in the world. You see, long before we can talk or understand logic, we are already absorbing. A baby doesn't need words to know whether it feels safe. It reads the world through sensation, through touch, tone, presence, absence. And the mother, or the one who played that role, becomes the emotional compass. Was love warm and steady? Was it unpredictable? Was it silent? Or perhaps it was there, but only when you behaved a certain way. Even if you had a good, stable upbringing, that doesn't mean this blueprint was perfect. No one's is. That's because every mother is also a daughter shaped by her own experiences, her own emotional map. And somewhere in that chain of inheritance, some things get passed along that don't quite belong to us. Expectations, fears, unspoken rules about how to earn love or what it means to be good enough. And without realizing it, those early messages settle into the background of our adult lives. You may have found yourself drawn to people who needed saving, or pushed others away the moment they got too close. Maybe you've spent years overachieving, always feeling like you had to prove something. Or perhaps even now, a quiet voice in the back of your mind still wonders if you're lovable just as you are. These patterns aren't random. They're not flaws in your character. They're emotional contracts written long ago, and often without your conscious permission. Until we bring these patterns to light, they continue to live in our shadows, guiding our choices in ways we don't always understand. But here's the beautiful part. Just because something began with your mother doesn't mean it has to end there. You are not stuck in this story. You are its author. And there is still time to turn the page. This is where the concept of individuation becomes such a powerful path. It's not a fancy word for becoming better. It's a simple, quiet invitation to become more yourself, to peel away the layers of who you were taught to be, and reconnect with who you truly are beneath it all. And it starts with awareness. The next time you feel triggered, whether it's from criticism, being ignored, or trying to please everyone, pause for a second. Ask yourself, is this really about what's happening now, or is it stirring something older? That question alone can shift your whole day. I'll give you a simple example. Imagine you're having a conversation with someone and they suddenly become distant. You immediately feel a knot in your chest, maybe even a sense of panic or rejection. In the present moment, it's just a conversation. But if you look deeper, maybe it echoes a time when distance from your mother meant you had done something wrong. That old feeling gets pulled into today, even if the situation is completely different. This doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're human. And the good news is, once you begin to notice these emotional echoes, you gain the power to respond instead of just react. That's the quiet strength of healing. Not that nothing ever bothers you again, but that you learn to meet it with compassion and curiosity instead of shame. And yes, it takes time, especially when these patterns have lived inside you for decades. But age is not a barrier here. It's a gift, because with age comes the wisdom to pause, to reflect, to choose differently. You've already lived so many lives within this one life. You've weathered storms. You've built families, friendships, careers. This next part, this healing, isn't about fixing the past. It's about freeing the future. And part of that freedom comes from seeing your mother not just as a symbol, but as a person. A whole person. With strengths, limitations, wounds of her own. When we stop expecting her to be perfect, whether in memory or in real life, we stop needing her to be our answer. And in that moment, we begin to mother ourselves. We start offering the very things we've spent a lifetime waiting for: kindness, permission, patience, love. You don't need to go back and relive everything. You don't need to sit in judgment of the past. But you do deserve to understand the roots of your feelings. Because when you do, they stop controlling you. They start teaching you. And from that place, a deeper peace begins to grow. So let's stay right here a little longer. Let's continue to gently peel back the layers and walk this path of healing together. You're not alone in this. And no matter where you started, this is a journey you can take. At any age, at any stage, and in your own time. Let's continue with a thought that may feel both familiar and uncomfortable. How often do we find ourselves looking to others to fill a gap we didn't even realize we had? Maybe it shows up in a craving for recognition, from a partner, a friend, even a grown child. Or perhaps in the quiet ache we feel when no one calls, or when someone pulls away. That ache, that longing, it's not just about loneliness. It's often the voice of an unmet need, one we may have carried for a very long time. We often unconsciously project our unmet needs onto the people around us. It's like handing someone a script without their knowledge and expecting them to play a role they never auditioned for. Maybe your partner becomes the one who's supposed to reassure you, the one who's supposed to make you feel worthy, lovable, safe. Or your adult child becomes the one you hope will never disappoint you. And when they don't meet those expectations, because they can't, not fully, it hurts. It feels personal, even though it rarely is. This is the power of projection. It's not about blame or fault. It's about awareness. The truth is, when we hand others the responsibility for our healing, we place our peace in someone else's hands. And no matter how much they love us, they can't give us what we haven't yet learned to give ourselves. That's where the real healing begins, not when someone else steps in to save us, but when we turn inward with love and curiosity. What did I long for that I didn't get? What was I afraid of feeling? What messages did I absorb that still shape the way I see myself? These questions aren't meant to stir up guilt or regret. They're an invitation. Because when you begin to see clearly, something remarkable happens. You stop living on autopilot. You begin to make choices that reflect who you truly are, not who you were taught to be. Think about this. How many times have you said yes when you really wanted to say no? How often have you silenced yourself to keep the peace? These are patterns we learn early. Maybe as children we learned that expressing needs led to disapproval. Or that staying quiet kept us safe. And we carried those lessons into adulthood, not because they still work, but because they once helped us survive. But survival isn't the same as living, and you've earned the right to live fully. So let's talk about what it means to start that shift. It begins with something small, noticing. When your chest tightens in a conversation, when your heart sinks from a look or a word, pause and ask, what does this remind me of? You don't have to answer right away. Just ask. Over time, patterns begin to reveal themselves. And when they do, you get to choose differently. For example, if your instinct is to apologize quickly, even when you've done nothing wrong, pause. Where did that need to make peace so quickly come from? Was it once a way to keep love close? Now ask yourself, is that still true today? This process, this gentle inner questioning, is part of what's known as individuation. It's the path of becoming whole. It's not about cutting ties or rejecting your past. It's about reclaiming all the pieces of yourself that got hidden or left behind. And one of the most powerful steps on this path is learning to remother yourself. That doesn't mean ignoring your actual mother or pretending the past didn't happen. It means recognizing the emotional needs that were never fully met and finding new ways to tend to them. Let's say, for example, that you grew up feeling like love had to be earned. Maybe you had to be helpful, quiet, or perfect to feel seen. That belief doesn't disappear with age. It often turns into a lifelong habit of overgiving, overfunctioning, or people-pleasing. But what if you began to give yourself the love you used to chase? What if you spoke kindly to yourself, especially on the hard days? What if you gave yourself rest without guilt, comfort without conditions? These aren't indulgences. They're acts of healing. And they matter now more than ever. Because at this stage in life, you've likely spent decades being there for others. You've shown up, supported, sacrificed. But now, you are allowed, more than allowed, to turn some of that care inward. To ask yourself, what do I need? And then truly listen. And you may find that the answers are surprisingly simple. You may crave stillness, laughter, honest conversation. You may want less busyness and more presence. Less pleasing, more truth. The child inside of you doesn't need you to be perfect. They just need to know you're finally paying attention. And here's something else that's important to remember. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean erasing your story. It means learning to hold it with compassion. To say, yes, that hurt, but I'm here now. I see it. And I choose to love myself anyway. You don't need to rush this process. There's no deadline. Healing happens in layers, in moments. In the way you speak to yourself in the mirror. In the way you pause before reacting. In the way you allow yourself to feel joy without waiting for it to be taken away. Some days will feel lighter than others. That's okay. What matters is that you keep showing up. That you keep choosing yourself, little by little, moment by moment. You are not too old. It is not too late. There's no expiration date on healing. And every step you take now ripples outward, not just in your life, but in the lives of those around you. When you begin to heal the mother wound, you interrupt the pattern. You stop it from being passed down. You begin a new chapter, one that's written not from old pain, but from new understanding. Let that truth settle in for a moment. You are the one who gets to write the rest of your story. You've come a long way already, just by being willing to reflect. And now, perhaps more than ever, it's time to look inward, not just with curiosity, but with tenderness. Because the more we understand where our emotional responses come from, the more we realize how long we've been carrying certain stories about our worth, our place in the world, and what love is supposed to feel like. These stories began in childhood, often without words. And as the years went on, we built lives around them, not realizing they were still shaping how we think, feel, and respond. But you are not your story. You are the one who lived through it, and the one who can shape what comes next. Healing, especially later in life, isn't about changing who you are. It's about finally giving yourself the space to be who you've always been, beneath the roles, expectations, and self-protection. It's peeling away the layers that were never really yours. The need to always be needed. The pressure to keep everyone happy. The silence you've held just to keep the peace. And most of all, the quiet voice that still whispers you're not enough. That voice doesn't belong to you. It came from somewhere. Maybe not even from words, but from feelings you absorbed as a child. And now, with clarity and kindness, you can begin to let that voice go. This journey we're talking about, individuation, is not loud or dramatic. It's gentle. It's deeply personal. And it happens through choice. Small, daily choices that say, I matter. Choosing to rest when you're tired, not because you've earned it, but because your body deserves care. Choosing to speak honestly even when it feels uncomfortable. Choosing to no longer abandon yourself to make others comfortable. These choices may seem small, but they are powerful. They are acts of healing. And that healing begins to change everything, not just your relationship with yourself, but with others too. You may begin to notice that the people around you respond differently. Conversations become more honest. Boundaries feel easier to set. You stop waiting for others to give you permission to feel good about yourself. You just begin to feel it. There's a kind of peace that comes with that. A peace not built on control or perfection, but on self-respect. And when you carry that peace inside you, you don't chase approval like you used to. You don't bend and twist to be accepted. You realize you were always enough. Think of it like this. Your mother gave you the first chapter of your emotional life. Maybe that chapter was filled with warmth. Maybe it was full of silence or struggle or uncertainty. Whatever it was, it shaped how the story began. But it doesn't have to dictate how the story ends. You are the author now. You get to decide how the pages turn, what lessons you carry, and which ones you finally set down. That shift, when you stop seeing your mother as a symbol and begin to see her as a person, is often the turning point. It doesn't mean ignoring the pain. It means understanding that she too was shaped by forces she didn't always understand. She had her own wounds, her own unmet needs. When you recognize that, something softens. Not in a way that excuses harm, but in a way that sets you free. Because it's hard to carry anger for decades. It's exhausting to hold on to blame. Compassion isn't about saying everything was okay. It's about saying, I see the full picture now, and I choose to move forward differently. And moving forward doesn't mean erasing the past. It means integrating it. True healing comes not from forgetting, but from making peace with the whole of who we are, including the parts that once felt too hard to face. So here's a small invitation for today. When you feel triggered or discouraged, or like you're slipping back into an old pattern, take a moment. Close your eyes. Put your hand on your heart. And say to yourself, I'm safe now. I see what this is. And I choose something new. That simple act of awareness, of compassion, of choice is how you begin to rewire old responses. It's how you create new patterns, not just for yourself, but for everyone who shares your world. Because whether or not you have children of your own, your healing touches others. The way you show up, with presence, with boundaries, with truth, gives others permission to do the same. That's how cycles shift. That's how pain stops passing from one generation to the next. You don't need to fix the past. You just need to understand it. And in doing so, you become the healing. And I want you to remember this. You are never too old to change your story. You are never too late to heal. The courage to look within, to face your emotional patterns with honesty and love, is not just brave, it's sacred. And it's yours. So take your time. Be gentle with yourself. Healing is not a race. It's a return to your essence, your truth, your voice. And no matter where the story began, you get to write the ending. There's something truly beautiful about arriving at a point in life where you no longer need to rush, where each day offers a quiet invitation to live with more meaning, more gentleness, and more presence. And when we reach this stage, when the noise of trying to prove ourselves begins to fade, it becomes easier to hear a different voice. Not the critical one from the past, but a wiser, quieter one within. The one that says, you've done enough. You are enough. But to hear that voice clearly, we often need to clear away what's been in the way. Old emotional contracts, silent expectations, roles we didn't choose, but accepted because we thought love depended on them. These may have helped us survive, kept the peace, preserved the relationship, but now they only cloud who we really are. This is where self-healing deepens. It's not about becoming someone different. It's about becoming whole. About welcoming back the parts of yourself you left behind. Your joy, your intuition, your boundaries, your voice. Some of these parts may have been quiet for a very long time. They may have been buried beneath decades of responsibility, sacrifice, or silence. But they are still there. and they are waiting for your permission to come home. Every person has an inner self calling them toward wholeness. Not just to be good or nice or liked, but to be real. To be deeply, truthfully themselves. That calling doesn't go away with age. In fact, it often grows louder in our later years, when we have more space to reflect and more wisdom to answer it. You may notice this calling when you're sitting quietly in the morning light, or when a memory stirs unexpectedly, or when you feel a tug in your heart that says, "There's more to me than what I've lived." That tug is your true self reaching out. And every time you listen, you take one step closer to peace. But here's something important to know. Healing doesn't mean nothing hurts. It means the pain no longer controls you. It means when difficult emotions arise, you meet them with presence, not panic. With love, not judgment. You begin to hold space for all of yourself. The young child who once felt invisible, the adult who carried too much, and the elder who now knows the difference between endurance and freedom. You start to speak more honestly, not to hurt anyone, but because your truth matters. You begin to forgive, not to excuse, but to release yourself. You become softer where you used to be guarded and stronger where you used to bend too far. And in the process, your life becomes more yours than it has ever been. There's a quiet power in that. A kind of inner authority that doesn't need to be loud or aggressive. It simply is. You trust your own voice. You follow your own pace. You stop apologizing for taking up space or having needs. And that trust, that steadiness, it's something no one can give you and no one can take away. And yes, there will still be days when old feelings return, when the ache of childhood wounds stirs again. That's okay. Healing doesn't mean you never fall. It means you know how to stand back up gently, with love. It means you stop turning your back on yourself. You become the safe place you've always needed. And from that place, everything begins to shift. You may find that relationships feel different. You might speak up more, or walk away from dynamics that no longer honor who you are. You might reconnect with people in a new way, less about proving, more about simply being. And sometimes you may feel grief for the years that passed without this clarity. That's okay too. Grieving what we didn't know then is part of healing now. But never forget, it's never wasted. Every step, every effort, every moment of reflection brings you closer to the life you were meant to live. A life not driven by fear or guilt or unmet expectations, but by your truth, your wisdom, your love. And if you're wondering what to do next, start here, make space for silence. Listen for the quiet places within. Ask yourself, what do I truly need today? Not what the world wants from you, but what your soul is asking for. Is it rest? Is it creativity? Is it connection? Is it solitude? Whatever it is, honor it. Because when you begin honoring yourself, you begin rewriting the emotional blueprint you've carried all your life. And in doing so, you don't just heal for yourself. You heal for everyone around you, for your children, your grandchildren, your friends. You become a lighthouse for others who are still finding their way. This is the gift of age. Not just the years you've lived, but the insight you've earned. The ability to look back with compassion and forward with intention. The chance to live the rest of your life not as a reaction to the past, but as a conscious expression of who you are now. And you are someone who matters. Your story matters. Your healing matters. Because it's not just about closing old chapters. It's about writing new ones. Ones filled with courage, joy, presence, and peace. So if this message touched something inside you, let it stay with you. Let it guide you. And if you feel moved, I invite you to share your reflections in the comments below. Sometimes your story is the light that helps someone else find their way home. If you found this helpful, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe to our channel. It helps us reach others who need this kind of quiet, honest truth. And if you know someone who might need to hear this today, consider sharing it with them. Healing is something we do together. Here's to living the rest of your life from a place of wholeness. Here's to understanding, not forgetting. And here's to you, right now, just as you are. Enough. Worthy. Free.